Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Tennis Weekly with Joel, Kim, and Chris on today's Australian Open quarterfinals catch up.
Djokovic stuns Alcaraz to reach the semis,
Gauff falls to resurgent Badosa.
and Sinner sets up a showdown with Shelton.
Chris, today is the 22nd of January, and we are here to catch up on the quarterfinals of the Australian Open here at Tennis Weekly HQ. So much has happened in the last 2 days, and we now have our semi-final lineups nice and complete, and we'll be digging our teeth into all of the quarterfinal action. How are you doing? What's been your highlight maybe from the last few days or since I saw you last?
Ooh, well, I wasn't on the last episode, but I do remember way back in the preview episode, Kim, I think Joel said there was no way that Djokovic was going to beat Alcaraz if they did play. In fact, he didn't think that Djokovic would even make it that far. So we both had him to win that match. So I think we can take some comfort there. So I think I'm doing better for that result and maybe a little bit better because Madison Keys, although she has dropped a few sets, my bold prediction of her going all the way isn't looking too terrible. So if we're talking tennis, I think things are on the up for me from a prediction perspective. But then on a collector set perspective, Kim, how are we doing? I should be checking in on
Yes, we aren't doing great, but then to be fair, neither is anyone. It's quite a
anyone.
low scoring as a general theme for this edition. All hopes now rest with Djokovic and Badosa. We have them in the semi-finals. Joel is definitely, I think, front runner for the slam spoon of shame. So we can both be very smug
Can finally get rid of
and
it, Kim.
laugh in his face. He only got one right with Jack Draper. And yeah, he had Djokovic out in round three. So yeah, well, a few people did to be fair. But yeah, I've potentially on for two. You've got two already. So but we do have a couple of players who are on two with one still to play. So I think the winner may be winning with three correct. So that's Mr. Tambourine Man at 91, Alexandra McClelland, and Brian, who are all in for the running still. So
Ooh,
well
and
done
what
to those guys.
what do
And
they
we'll
need?
update in due course.
They need a champion. They need a semi-final. So it could be very interesting. We might get a standout winner, which normally it goes to a tiebreak. So we'll let people know if it does go to a tiebreaker and what that question will be. So make sure you're checking your DMs if you're on two, or you might be about to get three.
It may well go to the wire with a tiebreaker. Usually does, to be
It
fair.
does.
But special mentions for Mr. Tambourine Man, who was the only one to get Zheng right, losing in round two. My dad, who entered as well, Mike, he was the
Wow.
only one to get
Mike
Coco Gauff
McKenzie.
correct, losing in the quarterfinals. And Nebi is the only one still with Badosa in the running, so that could potentially prove crucial for others, perhaps. So we will see. We will see. We'll update in a few days' time once we have further news and further action. But lots still to play for. But we do have to begin, I think, Chris, with our quarterfinal catch up with that Djokovic Alcaraz match because
Ugh.
it was the match we were all looking forward to, popcorn at the ready. And I have to say, I think I nailed my prediction for this one. I said Djokovic in four, and that is what happened. He did win in four sets, coming from a set down, maintaining his record over Alcaraz on hard courts and getting the job done despite an injury that looked like at one stage he was on his way out.
It did, didn't it? It was very strange to see, actually, the way he was able to come back from what looked like after losing that set might be, the end of it. I thought it might go quite quickly, or maybe he wouldn't complete the match. And was able to find another level. I think what was quite interesting was he said that the drugs kicked in. When I say drugs, I should say not performance enhancing drugs. I believe that these are absolutely fine, of course. So no one kind of jump on that, but very much a case where he played himself into the match. I think he's maybe surprised himself physically. I'm not sure he surprised you though, Kim.
No, I think we've seen this many times before where he's looked kind of down and out, is struggling with injury, with movement, and then he's just kind of given himself a bit of time, taken some
God mode,
painkillers, gone into god and goat mode,
goat
and
mode.
got through it. I mean, he did say if he'd have lost that second set that he didn't know if he would carry on playing, but he obviously got that second
Yeah.
set
That's not
and
very Andy Murray of him.
was
Andy must have
able.
said, you can't retire, you have to play five, and you have to finish at 3 a.m.
I mean, Andy Murray knows what it's like to play long 5 set matches with a metal hip. So I think that
Yes.
might have, yeah, instilled something extra in Djokovic. Although we have seen it before with when Djokovic has got an injury concern. He's managed to get through the match and, used his innate talents to help him do that. And I mean, going 2 sets down to Alcaraz, I think would have been, something to come back from. But equaling it up, I think that gave him the hope and the confidence. And yeah, had a second dose of the painkillers later on, and Bob's your uncle. He got through it. And it's not the first time we've seen this happen. I'm not surprised. I had him down for the semi-finals. I'm curious to see how we'll get on with Zverev in the next match, whether this injury that he has sustained is going to continue and, rear its head again, or whether it's kind of can be contained for now.
Yeah, we'll have to see, won't we? Because we've seen, Nadal famously won on one foot in Paris in 2022, had to have injections into that foot. I mean, you're able to, and what modern medicine's able to help you with is it can get you through, a couple more matches. Obviously, it's a lot harder at this sort of level and against the caliber of opponents that he will have to, beat if he has a chance of winning. Obviously, the world number two, Zverev, in the next round. That might not be the most physical contest always if the big serving is big serving. Then Jannik Sinner, I mean, hugely physical that could get. Obviously, he had some physical issues early in the tournament. They seem to have gone away. So it does seem a little bit like if it is survival of the fittest, then some of the other sort of pretenders might have a chance of victory. But I mean, you can't count out Djokovic in any situation. And I think this really did just make that point that don't forget about him. And, Tony Jones, don't forget about him. He is not irrelevant in any way. He's very much relevant. And he's taking out a player who's won 2 slams last year, beaten him in 2 Wimbledon finals. And I think it was a real statement win because this was sort of the time when people are saying, will he win another one? I'm not saying he's going to win another one, but he's definitely right up there with chances.
Yeah, he's definitely, don't count me out yet because I can still defeat, these youngsters on this stage. And he's now in his 12th men's semi-final at the Australian Open here. Obviously, he's won 10 of those previous 11. So he's got a pretty good record. And he's, interestingly, only the second male or female in the Open era to have reached 50 singles semi-finals at a single Grand Slam event. So Chris Evert being the leader of that with 52. So just shows his absolute dominance at this tournament.
I thought you meant by that he's had 50 semi-finals.
Oh no, sorry, I mean overall,
yeah.
Not
I was like, wow, like in doubles, mixed doubles, maybe.
Yeah, sorry, no, my bad. Yeah, just in Grand Slams in general.
Oh wow,
which doesn't surprise me.
Well, Chris Evert, wow, that's quite the record. I'm not sure it'll be around too much longer.
And Djokovic going into the semi-final against Zverev, we'll get on to Zverev in a bit, but he does have a winning head-to-head against Zverev. It's 8-4. They last played it in a Grand Slam here 4 years ago. So, he's got historically an advantage over Zverev. He's won their last encounter. I think they haven't played since 2023, which was Cincinnati outdoor hard. So, yeah, I think it really rests on the injury with Djokovic, if it's something that he's going to be able to continue with, or whether it was actually quite a serious one and he just, was able to get through the Alcaraz match. But is there a long-term impact? I'm not sure.
Well, we will have to see. Hopefully, kind of the extra sort of recovery time that they have until Friday, I believe that match will be. So they have a bit more time. It might be an evening session as well. That might also help physically, potentially. I also think that, the time is what you need, unfortunately. And you don't get much time at slams, but you do get a rest day. And because of the nature of the women's semi-finals being played tomorrow, he has got that extra day. So it could make a difference. I think with the Zverev clash, I think if you're Zverev, you have to prepare for Djokovic on all cylinders, irrespective of this. And the biggest thing is probably actually the mental side of things. I mean, if Djokovic is taking to the court, you have to expect he will complete that match. And I think for the Zverev match, which we'll talk about now, I mean, it really did come down to who has the strongest mental capacity, who is the mentally more strong, because set points for Tommy Paul in both, Zverev came through them. Quite often we've seen him not get better as matches go on, maybe miss an opportunity at some of the later points of slams. So, I mean, if Djokovic is on the court and physically fit, I think we probably would all most likely pick Djokovic based on his performance. But I mean, Zverev seems like maybe he's turned a new page in converting those set points and saving those set points.
Yeah, his match against Tommy Paul, he actually was set point down in the first two sets, but came through, saved those points, won the tie breaks pretty comfortably. So those first two sets really could have gone either way. He, clutched tennis to get through that to save the set point and then dominate those tie breaks and then drop the third, then back to dominating in the fourth, like to get it done 6-1. So not playing the greatest tennis, Tommy Paul a tricky opponent there. Although I think Tommy Paul did have a 2-0 head to head against Zverev. Zverev had never actually beaten him before. But Zverev's going to have to be in that kind of mode against Djokovic. Any opportunities is going to have to take because Djokovic is not a player that you can afford to waste your chances against. So yes, I mean Zverev played fantastic at the semi-final stage, I think last year, and then obviously lost from two sets up as well. So I don't know if that will be playing on his mind. Having got to the same stage 12 months later, he'll be wanting to avoid a sort of falling through the net again. But yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting clash with Djokovic. And I think Zverev, has been kind of under the radar this tournament. We haven't spoken an awful lot about him. He's just kind of been getting the job done relatively straightforward, aside from the set points against Tommy Paul.
Mm.
But Tommy Paul, he's into the top 10 after his tournament here. So although he lost, he's entering the top 10. So fantastic tournament still from him.
Yeah, really fantastic. You do just think, will he also be able to make that break and go a bit further in slams? He's had semi-final before down under, I believe. And with Zverev, as you say, like he's been you can only beat the player in front of you. That's all he can do, and that's what he has been doing. So it will be a bit of a different test when you play against, the goat of tennis, Novak Djokovic. But as you say, like it wasn't the cleanest. 44 winners, 56 unforced errors, a bit patchy at times. But for Tommy Paul, I think this is probably a match where he will look back and think, I could have won in 4 sets, or I could have won in 3 sets even because he had set points in those first 2 sets and then won the next 6-2. So the match that got away for him, but for Zverev, he's doing enough. He's getting through. And I mean, he's got a good shot at potentially, well, he's still trying to get that first title. And I think that's probably why we're not talking about him more because he's obviously getting on a little bit now. He's no longer the junior that he once was or the promising youngster. So maybe that's why we're not talking about it so much because he hasn't got that slam yet. Whereas if he had one, obviously we'd be saying this could be number 2 for him. Whereas we're really not sure at this point if that will come.
Yeah, it's still a big if, isn't it? Don't have full confidence when it gets to the crunch end of slams that he can go all the way. I mean, one thing that I did want to mention that happened in the match against Tommy Paul was the I don't know if you saw this, Chris, or if any of our listeners did, but they had to stop play because of a feather on the court. So the umpire, Nacho Forcadell, called a let just as Zverev was hitting a backhand because there was a feather on the court sort of floating down. And yeah, if Zverev was not happy, he was kind of up in the point and, a feather, it's kind of inconsequential. His argument was saying, he was saying there's feathers all over the place. They're light and fluffy. It's not going to cause any influence. So he wasn't particularly pleased with that decision. But do you think that was the right call by the umpire, Chris?
Oh, Kim, you put me on the spot. I
Would you
do
have
know
carried on?
you are partial to a sort of a pigeon moment at Roland Garros, and quite often they don't call them, do they? I mean, the audience are very distracted. I think for this one, if he said if it was a plastic bag, the umpire said, or something else very light and inconsequential, you still would cause the point to stop and you'd have to replay it. So I do understand that side. I also do understand the fact that if it's not affecting the rally, it's not affecting the rally as well. But then had Zverev lost the rally, maybe he'd have said, "Oh, this came on the court. You have to play a replay." So I think you have to make this call. If you see it, you have to call it. It does seem a little bit ridiculous, but so does Zverev saying there are a million feathers on the court. Because I had a little look. I think there were about 3, and not on the actual court. So we'll have to see. But I think it was probably the right call. But I do think it does make for wonderful sort of media fodder of like feather stops play. It just makes it seem like tennis is so fragile.
Yeah, and I don't think it was let's say a pivotal moment for the match.
Not one of those set points
Fortunately,
for Tommy
it
Paul.
wasn't on set point or match point. Can you imagine
Yeah.
losing a Grand Slam title, for example, on a feather?
Honestly, so
Um
funny. Buddy, it's a feather. Are you insane because of a feather? Those quotes, you're just like, it actually, you can't believe it's real, but it very much was real. And turns out I agree with it.
yeah, a very conscientious umpire, I think, taking the rules seriously and
Yes.
not taking any prisoners with them. So but yes, so Djokovic will be through to face Zverev, who came through Tommy Paul. Um let's do predictions once we've discussed the other
Yes, let's do
semi-final
that.
lineup that we've got, which we'll get onto in just a second. So Jannik Sinner against Alex de Minaur, that was today, and that was really very one-sided, very to plan for Sinner. He's got his 10th victory in a row over Alex de Minaur. Seems to be a bit of a bogeyman for de Minaur, and Sinner just looking very impressive yet again, despite the sickness that he had against Rune. He sort of seems back to business. Yeah, what did you make of this match, Chris? Was there any hope at any time for Alex de Minaur during the course of this one?
Well, when we saw the draw, Kim, I think we all immediately thought there's no way that de Minaur could go past the quarterfinals because Yannick Sinner has just been that good at hard court slams. So I was a little bit surprised at just how one-sided it was. I thought Alex had been playing some really great tennis. I thought we might have like a tie-break set, a 7-5. But I mean, Sinner was moving really well and he was hitting really, really big. And I think that's kind of the worst nightmare for someone like de Minaur. If he can't get that first strike in, he's just going to play runabout at the back of the court. And it just teed it up perfectly for Sinner to really just, tee off on some of those shots. So definitely a shame for Alex. Still, the furthest he's gone at his home slam, which is something that you have to commend. I do think the fact that Katie Boulter already flew out me think that maybe she didn't think he would win this one either, because if you thought that your partner, who is obviously Australian, might be in with a chance of winning the Australian Open, you probably wouldn't have booked that flight, Kim.
I'm surprised she didn't stay actually
It's just one
to
day, surely.
yeah,
It
I'm
was
surprised. I know he was joking about he needed to get, more prize money to pay for the wedding and stuff like that. But
maybe he got enough and she
well,
was like, great, I'll go look at a venue.
yeah, I've got to go check it out. Yeah, maybe so. I mean, I'm sure they've probably still got enough to have a lovely wedding. But yeah,
Yes.
it's a shame, isn't it? I don't know where Alex Winor can kind of work to kind of try and turn these around. This matchup is just not good for him. And when Sinner's, especially in this form, he's in fact, I think Sinner's only ever dropped one set to Alex de Minaur. So it's very comfortable for
Yeah, it's
Sinner.
giving
So he
Gail
wasn't particularly
Monfils,
challenged, was he?
Monfils Djokovic, isn't it? It's giving
Yeah, very, very
18-0 is that
one-sided.
one, I think.
And I mean, these guys are going to be playing a lot against each other still to come in their career. So this could, it could be up and up and up if Alex de Minaur doesn't sort it out. But Sinner does become the youngest man to reach consecutive semi-finals at the Australian Open since Rafa did it in 2008 and 2009. So he's backing up his title from last year and making his way deep into this year's. And he's also broken, I think, well, not broken, equaled a record set by Federer and Nadal for the fewest matches taken to reach 20 wins at the Australian Open since 2000. So when you start to put yourself in the record books along with the likes of the big three names, you know that you're doing something right, aren't you?
You
So
are.
it's just too good, I think. And seemed to be okay with the heat this time around. I think obviously having a late night match helped with that. But he will face Ben Shelton in the other semi-final. Shelton coming through against Lorenzo Sonego in 4 sets. Shelton now into his second semi-final. He did reach one back at the US Open in 2023. So it's been about 18 months since he's been at this stage. And I mean, we haven't really been speaking too much about Ben Shelton. I feel like he's just been coming nicely through the draw. Sonego, not the, most difficult opponent, not being impolite there. I just, it's not someone you'd perhaps expect to be playing against in a Grand Slam quarterfinal. But still, it wasn't all straightforward for Shelton. 4 sets, and I think he's going to need to play a bit better if he's going to have a chance against Sinner. What do you think, Chris?
I think that's very accurate. It will need to be a hell of a lot better because we all know that Yannick Sinner, I mean, his record as world number one is quite something. It's actually very intimidating. So hopefully Ben is the sort of character that will go out there throw caution to the wind and just leave everything on the court. I can see that being very much his style of play. I can't see him being intimidated, but I do think it does take a certain environment for him to bring out his best tennis. I think he plays really great tennis on home soil, especially. It's where he's won some of his titles. It's also a place where he's had his best result at a slam, at the US Open, obviously, prior to this. But I mean, his draw hasn't been the hardest. He did play Massetti, which he upset in 4 sets previously. He's obviously a slam semi-finalist previously at Wimbledon. So he has beaten a couple of big opponents, but Monfils withdrawing obviously helped him, and him knocking out Fritz probably also helped Ben Shelton, because that might not have been the best matchup for him. But if you're Jannik Sinner, I think you're rubbing your hands together at the prospect of this one, because it's probably not who you were expecting to see in the semi-final of a slam.
Yeah, and I think with Shelton's run, I think he has played some great tennis, but has been quite lucky with his draw, perhaps, and with like Monfils retiring. So I don't know if his level is good enough to challenge Jannik Sinner. He also benefited, I think, from Sonego getting really tight at the end of the match in the quarterfinals. So yeah, he's going to have to go some. But Ben Shelton, he is back in the top 15 now as a result of this win. He's not far off the top 10. I think he will be in the top 10 potentially if he wins this title, but that's going some. He's going to have to go some to do that. But oh God, I sound like I'm really negative, aren't I? But I'm being realistic, I suppose.
Well, think about it as like we're just giving our opinion, Kim. We believe anyone can do anything, but we've definitely learned that quite often they don't.
You can do anything, you just can't do everything.
Yeah, true.
That's what I keep hearing lately.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Your performance reviews.
Yeah, we're giving Ben Shelton his PDR right now.
It's right now 360.
Yeah, he has been calling out the Australian media though as well. Obviously following on from the comments about Djokovic by Tony Jones. Ben Shelton has been saying that other players have sort of had disrespect shown at them as well by the Aussie media. So would you say there's credence to that? Is there something going around in the water down under that's meaning the media are being a bit vicious, maybe?
That is an interesting question. So I used to be based in Australia for a period of time, and I definitely think the language and way they talk about things, their humor is very specific to Australia. It's a lot more in your face and a lot more abrasive. Not necessarily in a bad way, but I do think it's quite different from the American sense of humor. And I think Brits and Aussies tend to get along quite well, but there is still that bit of friction around some of the sarcasm or some of the things that they might say that we wouldn't. So I do think the nature of Australian commentary is a bit like that. I also think having, high profile players like Nick Kyrgios being as vocal as they are doesn't necessarily help the Aussie cause. But then you can point to such wonderful, respectful members of the Aussie tennis contingent like Ash Barty, or other people like Sam Stosur. There are so many who are so great at their jobs. It's just a shame that so many of the people that do say these things are people who have the biggest platform.
Yeah, maybe cultural differences then with Ben Shelton's opinion there and sort of rubbing up against some of the Aussie media. Let's have a look at Sinner and Shelton. Sinner has a 4-1 winning head-to-head against Shelton. Shelton actually won their very first encounter, which was back in 2023. Said that year really weirdly there at Shanghai Masters. Where Shelton did get the win. But since then, it's been one-way traffic with Jannik Sinner winning all of their encounters. So, yeah, it's going to have to go some, I think, for Shelton to turn that around. So, Chris, we'll come to the end of the first half. We've been looking at the men's quarters. Got our men's semi lineup, Shelton versus Sinner, Djokovic versus Zverev. I'm going to ask you now for your predictions. Who is coming through? Who's our final going to be between?
I'd love to surprise you. I don't think I will. I think I will say Djokovic and Sinner.
Okay.
What do you think?
So I think originally I had
Djokovic winning the whole thing.
Was that my main prediction?
I think that was your main prediction. We do so many predictions, listeners. One of them must be right.
Can't keep track. I'm going to say the same, Sinner, Djokovic. I'm going to say Sinner in 3, Djokovic in 4.
I actually probably would have gone the same. Maybe I'll throw in something to be different and say Sinner in 4.
Oh, okay. Shelton's getting a set, maybe. But yeah, listeners, let us know what you think. Let us know on social media. We'd love to know your thoughts. And we're going to take a quick break now, but do join us in the second half where we'll be looking back on the women's quarterfinals, including Coco Gauff suffering a shock defeat to Paula Badosa. Plus, we'll be unveiling, our women's semi-final predictions as well, which get started tomorrow. So do not go anywhere. Welcome back to the Tennis Weekly podcast and our Australian Open quarterfinals catch up. We're going to start, I think, with the Emma Navarro Iga Swiatek match, which was kind of one-way traffic with Swiatek winning comfortably 1 and 2. So the Polish bakery still delivering. But I guess one of the main talking points from the match, Chris, was the sort of lack of VAR, shall we say. There was a dodgy double bounce call, went against Navarro. She didn't stop play to challenge it. And then because she didn't stop playing the point, she wasn't able to use VAR, to kind of challenge the call. So Swiatek benefiting nicely from this one. But what's your take on this? Because there's been a lot of talk since then, and obviously Navarro not happy and kind of feels like the rules should be changed ultimately.
Yeah, I think she's expressed herself really well around this. Like, I think it's not a case that she thinks that Iga is cheating with this at all. I do think you do know if the ball has bounced because of the way it hits your racket. You can also see from the spin. So there are no excuses for the umpire here. And I think that's where, the fault does lie when there are bad calls made. Then you would go to a challenge, but then you have to stop the point. So it's the same rule that applies with double bounces and using the VAR, which is very strange because you can watch it after the point, everyone can see what has happened, but still you lose the point, which feels very strange. So she would have had to have stopped the point and said, hang on a minute, umpire, that shot right in front of you, I think you and Iga's not declared it, which she doesn't have a duty to necessarily. And the umpire hasn't called it. So you have to think, well, if they haven't, surely it's not. Surely they would be able to call it. So she thought, well, if I keep playing the point, there's a chance I might still win it. As opposed to if I stop, there might be a higher chance I lose it. So I do think that's quite interesting because you can see why that decision would be made by her, but you can also see the frustration of the fact that, well, I mean, I just assumed I was waiting for a call, but no call came. So I thought, get the ball back in. So I think there does need to be a change because this does seem like you have the technology, but we're not using it.
Yeah, I think obviously in this case, it would have been ideal if the umpire had just seen it and acted on it, because it's their job to notice those things and make the call. But I do get the reason why we have the rules as they are, in the sense that the player has to stop play to challenge and to kind of request the review, because you could be sort of asking for that left, right, and center. You carry on, play the point. Oh, if you lose it, then I'm just gonna continually like ask for like VAR to review things. And that would just disrupt the flow of the match. So I don't know. I can understand why
what about
they
Hawkeye, Kim?
have a strict decision.
Surely Hawkeye would know if it bounced because they mark all over the court where the ball bounces. So maybe it could be a automatic noise is made when the next bounce happens for the second bounce. I'm not sure if that's a technology that exists, but it is a big talking point, technology, at this Australian Open, almost said US Open, because they don't have technology all the time on all the courts that actually calls net cords. It's being done manually. And Erin Routliffe, who's the number 2 seed in the doubles, along with pod favourite Gabby Dabrowski, hopefully everyone's favourite, but she actually called this out saying, we have robots everywhere and we don't have them for the net. And then Jessie Pegula actually retweeted this and said, we have cameras in every player area everywhere we turn, but we don't have a net machine. And so you think about this, like they are pretty much being exploited in terms of all the content. Every locker room almost seems to have a camera, but then the technology exists to actually help them perform their job, which they're there to do, which is not to entertain in the behind the scenes. It's actually to play tennis, and it's not being used.
Yeah, it seems ludicrous when you put it like that, doesn't it? That they don't have that sort of basic functionality and still relying on, an actual umpire to call it and stuff. So yeah, totally get their point. Agree with them. That if you're going to have the technology in place, you've got to make sure it's where it's needed.
Yeah. And should Iga have called it? Do you think? Should Iga have said? She did make some comments.
She was sort of diplomatic afterwards, I think, not wanting to really go there. She was just sort of saying, oh, wait, I wasn't sure if it was a double bounce or I hit it with my frame. It was hard to say because I was like sprinting. I don't remember seeing the contact point. But she's not going to go and say, oh, yeah, it's definitely a double bounce and I just hit it anyway.
It's quite,
she said it's the umpire's job to call it. So, which is, it's
it isn't, because Jack Draper got in a lot of trouble with that Felix match where he didn't call it, but everyone said he would have known. And I feel like there hasn't been quite the same uproar about this because, I mean, it quite clearly did double bounce. And tennis players, a lot of people at the time said, you know. So I do think probably leaning on the fact that it's actually the umpire's job, not mine, is a good policy to take. But at the same time, I do think that I was surprised that, Navarro does have a few issues with some players. I'm surprised that this didn't cause one.
Yeah, I mean, I think some players willfully turn a blind eye when asked about it. But I don't think, again, this isn't something just like the feather. It didn't really, I think, affect the overall outcome of the match, shall we say, because it was a one-sided match. And Iga Swiatek, yeah, just still has only lost, I think, 14 games now in 5 matches, and 7 of those were against Siniakova in round one. So it's just the dominance continues and continues. And she will have to hopefully keep that up for her sake, because she's got Madison Keys in the semi-final, who came through against Aryna Svitolina. So Keys getting the better of Svitolina in, I guess, the sort of battle of the veterans of the circuit. I would say they've been around a while. They've, not ever gone to the highest heights, but definitely have the game to do so. But Madison Keys was the one that came through from a set down. What was your take on this one, Chris? Because obviously quite a big Svitolina fan, but you had very much picked Keys to
Mm,
do very well here. And
yes.
so did you think that she was the rightful winner of this one?
I think when we've seen Madison Keys not play well, it's not necessarily that pretty. So I just hoped that she was playing well. And if she's playing well, you know that Svitolina, she's a fighter. She's going to bring her best game. She's great at moving, great at retrieving, and she can also play pretty well on the offensive. So I just hoped it would be a good contest, and that's exactly what we got. I think everyone who stayed up to watch it said this was a match that was really won. I mean, some huge numbers. I mean, some of the winner numbers that we're seeing from Keys, 49 winners is such a big number when you think about the fact. I mean, if I do some very basic maths, do you need 20? Is it 24 or 28? 28 points to win a set. So when you think about that, she's really going for it. And I'm not going to necessarily draw attention to the unforced errors count, but it was her high quality match. So I wasn't surprised by the result. I think it would have been a bit of an upset if Svitolina had beaten her at this stage, given the form that Madison has been in, especially coming off that Rebecca win. So very pleased to see her putting it together. You just hope that the maybe element of her game actually does become something bigger. Because one thing I did share with you, Kim, on our WhatsApp chat was that this was prior to her victory. So this is referring to the quarterfinals only. But Madison Keys has now made 11 Grand Slam quarterfinals, which is more than Wozniacki, Linar, Jankovic, Ivanovic, Barty, which is a bit harsh because Barty obviously did cut her career short at a very tender age,
Yeah.
and Osaka. But one thing I was going to ask you was how many quarterfinals do you think that Osaka and Barty had?
Well, Asaka, she's won 4 slams, so I would have said,
Well, at least
okay,
four.
yeah, at least 4. So there must have been some occasions maybe where she lost in like the semis or something. So surely at least 7 or 8, six,
Yeah.
seven, 8.
Well, I can tell you she won every time she made the quarterfinals. She's 4 from 4, which
Oh
kind of blew
wow.
my mind as a stat, right?
So Osaka and all the other slams that she didn't win wouldn't have got in, maybe fourth round at best.
Yeah. So she
That's
she
quite
either goes all
something,
the
isn't
way
it?
or she
Yeah.
doesn't. So she's either in form or she's not. But Madison
Mm.
Keys making 11, I mean, that's hugely impressive for a player who hasn't been world number one, hasn't been top two in the world, top three in the world. So she really is dangerous at the big stage.
Yes, and obviously has gone to a slam final once before, so it's not like the quarterfinal has been her ceiling. So it's great that she's not sort of a Rublev, shall we say,
Yes.
or an Alex de Minaur, but without wanting to compare. But yeah, no, really pleased for her, I have to say. It's she obviously won the title in Adelaide as well, so she's not lost a match in a while. So she long may that continue for her. She will be hoping that Frances Tiafoe doesn't get in touch, because I did love hearing about this. She said she's got a bit of a joke with Tiafoe where in previous tournaments, if he like text her to sort of wish her luck, she would then go on to lose the next match. So she sort of asked him to give her a bit of radio silence as a sort of good luck gesture, because yeah, he brings bad luck to her. So she's asked for no contact for now.
Goodness. I mean, quite harsh saying, don't text me. I don't want to hear from you at all. Just leave me alone and we'll
Leave me
talk
alone.
after the tournament, which I think, it's
Well,
serious business. But I mean,
doesn't want the bad omens.
what is he sending her? If you're just saying good luck, I mean, he hasn't necessarily gone out of his way to like put a hex, or a curse on Madison Keys. I think he is wishing good luck, but maybe it's just the opposite. Yeah,
Superstition.
superstition. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yes. Well, they can be important. Certain players have their own superstitions, so
Do they?
we'll let them have that. But on the other side of the draw, Chris, we do have two very good friends who will be meeting in the semi-final, and that's Aryna Sabalenka and Paula Badosa. Sabalenka had a bit of a scare against Pavlyuchenkova, and Badosa came through Coco Gauff. So yeah, some surprising scorelines and results in there. Let's start with Paula Badosa. She beat Coco Gauff in straight sets. This is her first Grand Slam semi-final. About a year ago, she was thinking of retiring from the sport due to a kind of ongoing back injury. So what a way to kind of turn that around and change her fortunes. It's really, such a positive story from this tournament, isn't it?
It is, and it was really bad. I mean, I don't think many people realize just how debilitating the nature of her injury was. It was to the point where the doctors were saying you need to stop playing tennis. It was, I believe, it's quite similar to what Annette Kontaveit had, where she did have to stop playing, and so Paula said, "Well, I probably can try and do at best another couple of years." So she had no idea if the form would come, if she would have to keep retiring. And that's why there were a lot of these retirements that did happen because of the fact that she was trying to manage it and trying to get the strength up and get to a place where she could actually play and compete at this level. So for a player who has been as high as number two and has been through so much, you really do just think, thank goodness she's finally getting some of those results, because a lot of people thought she might be one of the, and this does sound a bit negative, but one of the least qualified players to potentially have gone to number two. And probably putting, the likes of potentially Annette Kontaveit might also be in that equation too. Also went to number two, also with a similar condition, which is quite a strange thing. But I do think it's proven to people that the talent level was very much there. And if she hadn't had this condition, she would have stayed right at the top of the game.
Yeah, and she beat Goff 7-5, 6-4. Coco had come in playing some great tennis, doing really well at the United Cup, especially. But what was it about Goff that just wasn't quite able to compete with Badosa in that quarterfinal, do you think?
The second serve did take a hammering, absolutely. I think she won 44% of points against the second serve. So that's always a bit of a risk with her. You never really know how rock solid that serve will be. Quite a lot of double faults at only six, but it did kind of fall at not great times. I would also say, though, that the unforced errors were really flowing, 41 unforced errors to 31 winners. So it wasn't the tightest match from either player, but it's not necessarily about playing the best tennis. It's about winning that final point.
Yeah, absolutely. And Badosa getting that job done. And she will meet Sabalenka because Sabalenka came through over Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova 6-2, 2-6, 6-3. She was down in that third set as well. At one point, we were thinking, oh, this is not the result we were expecting. Is this going to be a shock win for Pavlyuchenkova? But Sabalenka coming through, she hasn't lost here since 2022, I suppose. And she hasn't lost a set since 2023. So the fact that she's even lost a set was a shock. But yeah, getting the win done in the end, which is all that matters. But yeah, quite a more difficult scoreline than we thought it might be initially.
Definitely. She has actually taken her out at a slam before at Roland Garros, Pavlyuchenkova, bailing her in the final set of that. But that was probably before, Sabalenka 2.0 came to the force, the new serve, when all of that was sorted out. So very good to see Pavlyuchenkova play at this level. But I have to say, Sabalenka went off the boil. Pavlyuchenkova raised her game, and then Pavlyuchenkova just literally went away. She was up, she was playing so well, she gifted a break back to love, and then she never looked likely that she was going to do anything more. I think she was 3-2 up even. So it was gifted away. Sabalenka survives, but so often these champions do survive. And as I've said previously, it's about surviving at this point of a slam to get yourself into the places where you can play better. It's a new day, it's a new opponent, and it's an opponent that she's had a very good record against. Against Badosa, she has a really positive head-to-head. They are very good friends. So I think that potentially that does make it a bit of a different sort of matchup. But I mean, it's 5-2 to Sabalenka in the head-to-head, and all of the recent matches that they've played, apart from where there was a retirement, have pretty much gone the way of Sabalenka. So not necessarily looking on paper like it would be the closest of matches, but I think at this stage of a slam, who knows? Because Sabalenka hasn't been convincing in her last match.
Yeah, I mean, they are really good friends, like you said, but they have said that when it comes to the tennis, they're putting that aside and, obviously be full on competition mode on the court. Sabalenka's still trying to get 3 titles in a row, of course. She would be the first woman since Martina Hingis,
Ooh.
97 to 99, to get that. So, yeah, lots to play for her. But will Badosa be able to put another spanner in the works and get the win over her really close friend? We do have that as the first match tomorrow in the ladies semis. They're both in the night session, which is great for kind of European fans and audiences. And then that's followed by Keys Swiatek. So, of course, we do need to make some predictions. Who are you going for, Chris, and in what set scoreline?
Oh, that is a big one. We'll start with the first match of the day, the two soulmates, as they've called themselves. I think, given the nature of the head to head and the fact that we have seen a lot of nerves, some really shaky moments. I mean, the US Open last year for Badosa was a particularly difficult one. I'd have to go with Sabalenka because she is so tried and tested at semi-final level and at Grand Slam level, and this is pretty much her home now. And for the second match of Keys versus Swiatek, the issue is here we've seen Iga playing at her best level, and I think Madison definitely does have the level to compete with that. But will she be able to do that over 3 sets consistently? And I don't think she will. So I think this probably will go to Iga, and I think both of these matches are likely to be straight sets.
Yeah, that's a fair analysis. I would say
Who are you going to give a set to?
think Sabalenka in three and Swiatek in two. Um, but I don't know. Do you know what? I could totally
The
see
Maddie Dream is
both.
alive.
I could see Badosa toppling Sabalenka maybe,
But do
but I
you
don't know.
think Badosa Keys is possible? Is possible, but is it
It's
probable?
possible, but unlikely. Yeah, I think Swiatek surely is. I
Yeah.
know she's been dominating, but and eventually you think Keys has played a lot of tennis, winning Adelaide as well. She's going to run out of steam.
Come on, Stuck.
Yeah, it's really intriguing. So I'm
It's a
glad they're
good
both in the night
lineup.
session. Yeah, it's a really good lineup. All seeds, I mean, some slight surprises perhaps, but they're all seeded quality players. So it should be some good tennis for sure. And then obviously the male semi-finals will be on Friday morning, UK time. Interestingly, we put a poll out on our X, I think, asking, is Novak Djokovic now favourite for the Aussie Open title? And 57.7% of people said no.
Oh.
So
Sinner
perhaps they,
fans, me, I think.
yeah, maybe Sinner is the one to
Zverev
stop him.
fans.
Hmm. We'll see. Lots to play for. So I guess we'll be back. I think yourself and Joel will be back on Friday once all of the semi-final action has rounded up in the singles. So yeah, let's look forward to those over the next few days. And listeners, I do hope you've enjoyed our latest episode of the Tennis Weekly podcast. Remember to subscribe to us to stay up to date on all the action over the next couple of days from the Aussie Open. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and all major podcasting platforms out there. So if you like what you're hearing, then do make sure to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Plus, like and subscribe to us on YouTube and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes.
And once you've hit that notification bell, do head over to our other social media, our Facebook, our Instagram, our TikTok, and our X. And the handle for all of those is Tennis Weekly Pod. You can also purchase, I'm still plugging that final bag, Kim, before we get a refresh, which is at etsy.com/shop/Tennis Weekly Podcast. It will look wonderful. Well, maybe not for women's semi-finals day. It wouldn't arrive in Australia in time, but maybe for Roland Garros, it could be lovely. And you can email us as well at tennisweeklypod@gmail.com. Or as always, please check out our website, tennisweekly.co.uk.
And we'll be back on Friday at Tennis Weekly HQ for our semi-finals catch-up of the Australian Open. So I hope you can join us for that. But in the meantime, it's goodbye from Chris.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me. We'll see you again soon.